One question I've had ever since we got the brand new Numa was, why do we see this dead body hanging in the spawn room? Now, for the people who are unfamiliar with the old Ether story, this probably doesn't seem like a big deal. It's just for decoration or something like that. But for the people who are familiar with the old Ether storyline, they would tell you that, hey, that's not just for decoration. That's actually a character, and he has a name. His name is Peter McCain. And if this is Peter McCain once again, I think that must be very, very significant. And the reason I say this is because not many characters have been brought back from the old Ether storyline into the new Dark Ether storyline that we're currently in. I mean, I think it's only been Samantha and Eddie, like literally no one else thus far, so it would be incredibly interesting that the third character ever that they bring back from the old Ether story would be Peter McCain, which leaves me with a lot of questions. But before we can continue any further, I do have to make an acknowledgement of something, and that is that I am assuming this is Peter McCain, and we don't know that for a fact. This could easily just be a new character that doesn't really matter, or maybe does matter, but it's only for this story. It's not really Peter McCain, it's just some unlucky guy that ended up in a very similar situation to Peter. Which, true, that could happen, but I would kind of find that a little weird for a couple different reasons. I mean, why are we seeing a random US soldier just hanging in the exact same spot that a US soldier was hanging in the original one that was Peter McCain? And also, why is he still missing that left arm? And that fact alone is what makes me believe that this is still Peter. But to understand why, let me give you some backstory on the original Peter McCain. So in the original Ether storyline, Peter McCain was a US spy who was sent to infiltrate Group 935. He did this successfully, originally worked at the Dorize facility, but then was transferred over to the Verrucht facility. While he was there, he feared the experiments he was doing there along with the other Group 935 scientists were getting out of hand, and that there was sure to be an outbreak because they were not able to control their undead experiments. Because of this, he sent a message back to the United States requesting to be exfiltrated from this mission. Unfortunately for him, Group 935 intercepted this message and they immediately arrested him. But the very next day after his arrest, what Peter feared actually came true, and there was a zombies outbreak at the Verrucht's facility. Now, Peter was able to escape, but he wasn't able to escape all in one piece, because something he left behind was his left arm. And this is the reason why we see in the original Ether story, all the power switches have a left hand still holding it, because it was Peter's hand. Regardless, though, he was able to escape and then eventually got back into contact with the US. And when he got in contact with them, they told him to head over to the Rising Sun facility, or Numa. And how he got here was taking a plane and he parachuted in. But unfortunately for Peter, on his way down, he somehow died. And of course, this is why we see his dead body hanging over the original Numa. And if we stop here, it could tell us a couple things. Like, it first explains why he's missing his left arm, because he was involved with the outbreak at Verrucht, right? So that's where that went. And as we could see in the new Numa, this guy is also missing that left arm, so it seems kind of interesting that that would still be the case. But now if we do continue the rest of this video, assuming this is Peter McCain, it would then lead the question of, how did he lose his arm at Verrucht? Because the whole reason he was there was because he infiltrated Group 935, but there isn't a Group 935 in this story, so why would have he been to Verrucht, or how would have he lost his arm? Well, one way they could explain it is just say, well, maybe it wasn't Group 935 and it was just Duahide or Endstation, one of the two evil Nazi groups inside the current Dark Ether story. Which could be fair, maybe there's just a new Verrucht with Endstation or something like that. That could happen, but I guess we'll just have to hope to see in the future some more evidence for this. Now, some may be led to expect that, okay, that's where it ends. There's nothing really else to say here, but what if I told you the old Ether storyline was weird, and was very weird in some cases, because the thing is that I did tell you the story of Peter McCain in the old Ether story, but in that old Ether storyline, there was actually two different Peters. And I think that second Peter has a very, very interesting story to go alongside with him. And let me tell you his story. So this version of Peter, they came from one of the fractured universes, which I'm not going to get into. We don't need to really get into all the craziness of the BO3 story, but just know he's from a different universe. Well, his story is very similar to the original Peter. He was a spy at Group 935, he lost his arm at the Vruk facility, and he was heading over to Numa, but that's where their two stories split, because what happens then is when Peter McCain goes to jump out of the plane to go to Numa, it didn't happen the same way, because he didn't just go straight down, because a portal appeared under him and he was teleported through it, and this teleporter took him over the battlefield of Stalingrad. And this is why we see in the intro cutscene to Gorod Krovi, Peter McCain falling alongside Primus, and here is when Primus used him and his parachute to land to safety, seemingly leaving the dead corpse of Peter McCain just to sit there. Now, once more, you would think that this wraps up his story, but again, we are talking about the old Ether storyline, and to stress it once more, it was weird, because the thing is that somehow the Americans were able to take his body back, and they brought his body to the United States, and they kind of just held onto it, I guess, for like 20 years, because those 20 years later they still had his body, and they brought it to Camp Edwards, or as we know it, Alpha Omega. And there they had something called the Elemental Shard, which was a very powerful thing, I guess, because one of the things it was actually able to do was bring Peter McCain back to life. So yes, he came back to life, and there he worked with the American group Broken Arrow for a period of time, but unfortunately his time there, the director Purnell went crazy, used the Elemental Shard and the APD to turn into the Avogadro, and then somehow got Peter McCain and put him into one of the mannequins we see around the map. Yeah, just some normal Ether storyline stuff. Regardless though, the events of Alpha Omega take place, and when they are doing that, during the main Easter egg, we put Peter McCain back together. Of course, he's still trapped inside the mannequin, and he doesn't like this very much, so we bring this orb to him, and somehow he's able to transfer his essence from that mannequin over to the orb. And when we do this, he tells us something quite interesting.
It's been a long, strange journey. Living, fighting, dying, finding out that death's not the end. Thanks to you, my journey continues. I have some unfinished business to attend to. I'll never forget what you did for me.
I have some unfinished business to attend to. And of course, then he flies off over to do who knows what. And this is where we thought the story of Peter McCain came to an end, because soon after that, the final map in the Ether storyline took place, of course being Tog der Toten, and he was never mentioned again. And this left people wondering whatever came of him, and maybe they had something originally planned for him in the original ending they had for Ether, but we never saw that. But what this does for us today is leaves a loose end from that old Ether story, because it seems like there's just a random Peter McCain orb floating around somewhere, and where he could go and what he could be doing could really be a lot of different things. And this is where it ties back to the new Numa, because I don't know exactly how it could have happened or why it would have happened or what Peter was thinking here, but I think there is a chance that Peter McCain in his orb form could have made his way into this new Dark Ether universe, and he could be doing things that we just don't really know of. Now, one of the things that he may have done is maybe turned himself back into a human and then got himself killed over Numa. I don't know if exactly he would do that, but at least it would explain why we see a previous Ether character making his way over to this new Dark Ether story. Now, I still don't think that if Peter McCain's orb is here, he just didn't die here and that's it. Maybe it's something more to that, and maybe we just have to wait for more information because we really just don't have any leads for why Peter is here, to be honest. I'm just here to relay some information for what could kind of start a conversation of why we may be seeing Peter McCain in this new Dark Ether story, because right now it doesn't really make sense what's going on with this hanging body in the new Numa, and it's been something I've been curious about, but for why exactly it's there, I'm still not sure, but I just have a feeling that the old Peter McCain is playing a role here, and especially him in his orb form. But I guess all we could do now is just wait and see if Treyarch ever gives us any hints or clues on what could be happening here, and once they do, you know I'm going to be ready to make a video on it. Regardless though, that's going to wrap it up for me. I'd love to hear what you guys think of everything I've said here in this video. Do you guys actually think that this is Peter McCain on the new Numa? Or do you think it's just some random character, or maybe he's just a new character altogether and it has nothing to do with Orb version of Peter McCain? I'd love to hear all your thoughts and opinions down in the comment section below. Regardless though, that's going to wrap it up for me, and if you guys enjoyed this video and found it informative in any way, shape, or form, I would really appreciate if you dropped a like, subscribe, bell, share, and all that great stuff. But I'm going to go, and I'll catch you guys next stream, video, or whatever the heck it may be, and laters guys.